And a great example is NVD. Last year, there was a lot of problems with it. Is it going to go away? Will the funding happen? There's other very strong fundamentals with NVD that's a big problem. Anything prior to 2022 does not get updated, even if there's new information about that. Problem is most OT systems are going to have a vulnerability that's running on there prior to 2022 that's going to have something might happen to maybe an exploit comes out against it. In addition, there's about 40-some thousand backlog of CVEs to get enriched. So we utilize AI to fix both those problems. So now we enrich them within 48 hours of any CVE coming out. What we like to say internally is whoever knows their environment the best is going to be the winner, whether that be the attacker or it's going to be the defender. One of the biggest gaps we see in our industries, especially in business verticals, are going to have the gaps is going to be in the healthcare space, for example. My background is I used to do offensive work for U.S. intelligence agencies, and we would have a team of individuals when we would do any form of an offensive campaign. Now, using a small language models trained on specific types of skill set, as an agent-based system, I can now perform the exact same functions by myself where I do not need an entire team of analysts and reverse engineers. Their technology is used worldwide. You just compromised thousands of companies with just one attack, where it doesn't take much to do that. All it takes is just a bad business practice, to be honest, without checking to verify that those libraries that are being hallucinated by these AIs are doing that. One of the key areas that we get a lot of feedback from is not just from the CISO, it's from other C-level executives. Like, you have a lot of immense data on my business. What other information can you tell me using AI? A CFO would love to know in his hospital, he's got 20 insulin pumps, but only 18 of them are actually used consistently. Why are the other 2 not being used? Is that a business process? Is it a backup system that's in there, or they're just not being used? Can I get rid of them? So we're getting a lot of really interesting feedback and questions from a lot of different areas, not just the cybersecurity aspect of things, but you've got a lot of data. How can we make more sense of everything that you're doing, that we're doing, that would make better financial decisions for us?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's session. This is brought to you by Armis. I'm Amin. I'm here based in Toronto, so if you guys have any questions locally after, so feel free to swing by. We got 2 very special guests. Coming to your left is Michael Freeman, the co-founder of CTCI, now part of Armis, leading the threat intelligence space with next-gen AI. Really cool conversations that are going to come with Michael, as well as with Mo, who is our CTO at Armis, an OG. So today's discussion is going to be around AI fighting AI, and I'll kick it off to you two to start this off. And please feel free to just raise your hand or signal me, and I'll pass the mic for any questions and conversations.
Yeah, so recently I was asked by some individuals out of Israel, where do we see in the near future, 3 to 5 years out, where AI agents are going to be? And one of the areas that we are working on internally within Armis is a more agentic-based systems for future thinking. One of our goals is to take a look at the larger landscape of what is happening in the world. And one of the areas we identified is there will be a point in time in the near future where cybersecurity people are going to have to give up some control of the environment and the controls they have to allow agents to actually function. And that led into, another question is, what is going to happen when threat actors really start using agentic-based systems, which is an area I really focus on. And what we like to say internally is whoever knows their environment the best is going to be the winner, whether that be the attacker or it's going to be the defender. One of the biggest gaps we see in our industries, especially in business verticals, are going to have the gaps is going to be in the healthcare space, for example. So one of the questions I had for Mo is, where are you seeing healthcare starting to identify where not just how AI can help its, healthcare practitioners, but the actual business itself?
Yeah, I think healthcare is very interesting because I think historically, healthcare has actually been one of the slowest ones to adopt newer technologies or newer methodology. I think they may have had certain regulations that provide some type of guidance, but anytime you heard the word cloud, it's an automatic no. But then what ended up happening, you have healthcare organizations that started rapidly adopting cloud and it was driven by the business. You had research departments hosting entire cloud infrastructures because they became very accessible. You had Azure, swipe a card, they have tons of data now that they're churning up in the cloud to help scale. I think with AI, it's very interesting. I feel like it's following a similar pattern because you have the business that's really pushing and adopting the usage of AI. And I feel like when I talk to CISOs, like, what's your bigger concern right now? Is it shadow IT or is it shadow AI? Right? On one side, you might have a couple of devices connecting to your network. On the other, you have tons of data that might be leaving your network. And it is for good use. You're unlocking a lot of business potential and business outcomes. But I think this is something that security teams are just very heavily struggling with. And I think that's a fair point you raised, that there's two sides of it, right? There's always the side of malicious actors using AI that I'm going to pick your brain about in just a minute. And then on the flip side, there's the actual business adoption of AI. In one term, there's, hey, we're unlocking faster attacks and more intelligent attacks and ability to operate under the radar. And on the other side of the house, it's, okay, I need AI, but how do we secure it? But also the knowledge, I don't want to necessarily call it a knowledge gap per se, but that upscaling our security teams to be able to understand and handle what does agentic AI look like versus what does a LLM look like versus on-prem versus off-prem, all those different aspects of AI that I think we generalize AI, right, just like we'll generalize cybersecurity, but I'll understand there's so many domains under it. It's very hard to get a grasp on it.
Definitely. One of the key areas I'm definitely seeing is you had mentioned that offenders are really moving to utilize AI. Some of the big key areas we're really starting to see a focus on is a very competent individual utilizing AI in areas that would typically take a team in the past. My background is I used to do offensive work for U.S. intelligence agencies, and we would have a team of individuals when we would do any form of an offensive campaign. Now, using a small language models trained on specific types of skill set, as an agent-based system, I can now perform the exact same functions by myself where I do not need an entire team of analysts and reverse engineers, things like that, or someone help me identify weaknesses within the system. I can now allow my agentic-based systems to go forth and do that. We're tracking very closely threat actors who are evolving those processes and building their own tool sets in that. Chinese, for example, have two different tool sets. Two different companies are actually working on that themselves to develop those tool sets. Surprisingly, though, they're not as actually far advanced what you'd think they would be compared to like the Russians, for example. The Russians have been very good at allowing individuals that are very top tier researchers themselves, giving them the resources to actually go forth and do the research more cutting edge with the resources behind them. And actually sometimes we're seeing where they have no directive besides go forth and do damage in this region. And so there was a recent country recently attacked where the critical SCADA systems were damaged and the attacks were designed to damage. A lot of the techniques were known, a lot of the vulnerabilities were known, but the attacks themselves were carried out by actually one individual. And when you look at it, it looks like it would have taken a team of individuals to actually understand the different types of SCADA systems. Now we know who the guy was, and it's not his area of expertise. He's a really good exploit writer, but he is not someone who knows these types of SCADA systems in and out. The AI learned about it, learned what he needed to do, even helped him build custom firmware that would actually cause these systems to crash in certain ways that he wanted to. So we're definitely seeing that happening. Really, the interest is definitely there. But right now, I would say it's still at a really good expert to be able to pull this off.
So let me pick on a couple of threads there. I want to understand a couple of different elements. So I think there's the attacker scenario, how our attackers are using it. There's the defense scenario. And then within, I'll call broader term of IT, there's the usage of AI to analyze things like code and development. And then there's the business side of the house.
Right.
Okay. So You mentioned attackers. Seems like number one, how attacks are changing. There's the scope.
Right.
How you mentioned you have exploit writers that are now learning very quickly and exploiting non-conventional systems that they may not focus on historically. So
Correct.
there's a much higher risk of, let's say, critical infrastructure, healthcare, potentially governments, etc.
Yes.
So what are you seeing in terms of attack tactics beyond, let's say, knowledge gathering being leveraged by attackers?
The newest method we've seen, we call it slop squatting. And essentially what it is using AI to write code for you. Everybody's moving to that right now. It's really great and easy to do with Claude Code. We use it internally ourselves and various other tool sets like that to help us write code. The problem is it hallucinates on certain types of packages and consistently. So threat actors are also writing code themselves, and they consistently are seeing certain types of libraries being hallucinated. Maybe the version doesn't exist. So therefore they take that knowledge, go register that actual software library on GitHub or NPM package, make the function work like they're supposed to, but they build it in a backdoor system. So instead of compromising one individual or one company, they now compromise anybody writing software within that company, because maybe that might be a software development firm that their technology is used worldwide. You just compromised thousands of companies with just one attack, where it doesn't take much to do that. All it takes is just a bad business practice, to be honest, without checking to verify that those libraries that are being hallucinated by these AIs are doing that.
So are we seeing then a much higher uptake in supply chain based attacks?
Absolutely.
That I think historically a lot of organizations, I think recently there's been more focus on third party risk and supply chain, but it seems like because of AI, there's a much stronger focus on that. So let me ask you, kind of going to a broader CISO view of things. A lot of organizations I talk to, yes, third party risk is an element that we need to focus on. Let's assume they have a couple of the different cyber hygiene practices implemented, because I know still a lot of organizations still suffer from IAM, MFAs, and all that fun stuff. What would you say a CISO needs to focus on, whether it's implementing a third-party risk program or maturing a third-party risk program?
When I see the adoption of AI across the board, whether you said it's business practices, defenders or all the offenders, my view on it is, if you really want to defend your environment, you got to go back to the most basics. The most basics are, what assets do you actually have? What do those systems do? How do they support the business itself? Once you get a good handle on that actual information, that's where you can look at it and go, okay, great. I had a great third-party risk program, but it only covered 80% of these assets that I actually knew about that supported this environment. Maybe I had 10% of what I now know in the past. I didn't know in the past what that assets actually existed. And then you had these unmanaged systems managed by third parties that now can help you identify where you need to build a new third-party risk program, or evolve in certain areas at that point. Maybe you realize, okay, here's a new attacking your software supply chain. You can actually then put into your contract with your software suppliers, verify that you've actually validated every single software library that you use. Not just the fact that you have an SBOM, but you've actually verified that it's not actually backdoored. So take this knowledge and then put that into practice. It's the exact same process we should be doing, but you just have better knowledge to act upon it now.
Yeah, and I think if I were to, so I know a couple of years ago there was a lot of the Hikvision cameras that were blacklisted in government locations and things of that nature. Kind of send a lot of, I think, government agencies into a bit of a frantic panic to understand where those cameras were, because they had certain backdoors from other international attackers and agencies and countries and whatnot. So if we assume a asset gets compromised, what are some of the more common, because now I'm kind of figuring out, okay, so if we assume a compromise,
right,
whether it's a third-party system, whether it's an external system, I'm a blue team member, I'm incident responder, I'm a SOC analyst.
Right.
What are some indicators that I would look for in order to be able to detect, but also how is it that the let's call it SOC analysts for now. How are we seeing a day in their life change as a result of the evolving threat landscape?
That's a really good question. A lot of times, security operations teams think that they can throw AI behind the scenes and allow it to find the bad. The reality of it is you're just throwing a Band-Aid on top of something that's bleeding out. And it's not the best approach to take it. What I would recommend to people do is use AI in such a way that enhances the skill set of your top incident responders and your top defenders. They're the ones that are going to actually know, is this tool giving me the right feedback? A lot of times, junior analysts wouldn't even know that. And they're going to take that at face value and go, yeah, this looks correct, potentially, but it's actually not going to be. So having that maintain that skill set, utilizing AI to help them increase that skill set too, is also going to be key. So that's one of the areas I definitely focus on that is utilizing AI in the right way, not thinking it's going to be some black box that will save you, because at the moment, it's not going to.
Yeah, that's interesting because right now, it's not a matter necessarily of AI technology being able to, implement some amazingly sophisticated and next gen, and I know, kind of we'll park that on the side for a second, detection capabilities. Right now, what organizations I think also need is scaling their expertise, scaling the most expert folks on their teams that are responsible for incident response and can detect this. And I think you raise a really good point, because junior analysts might have that runway that they need to understand and learn that environment, but overlaying AI on top of team members that are already exposed and learn, and they can validate some of that as they're building more sophisticated detection models.
Exactly. One of the areas I recommend customers do is when you have this expert knowledge on in-house, don't replace them with AI. Use AI to train the next generation of AI. Use a small language model. There's plenty of vendors out there that can provide that for you. Use that knowledge transfer so that way when a junior analyst is running into something, they have that ability to ask that small language model that is trained on that subject matter expert in that business context. What is important here? Why is this camera communicating to this IP address? The IP address is not on our network. Is it doing a software update like it's supposed to? What's the mechanisms behind that? That information, if you capture it correctly within an AI system from the subject matter experts, it's going to give you a better value.
So I think we talked real quick about CISOs and their direct security teams. Now, let's talk about how CISOs and security teams would be consulted, I hope, across different areas of the development side of the house. They're actual different departments. So I'm a developer. I'm going to develop code. Bunch of amazing AI tools out there to help streamline developing that code. Third-party risk you mentioned, libraries that are vulnerable. How can we do a secure review or ensure security of those AI platforms for code generation? And on the flip side, how do I help optimize my security teams to be involved in that, given all the other areas that my team's already involved in?
We take it a couple different ways that we do it. We built in-house our own secure code analysis platform. We will be turning it into our product soon. But one of the key areas we really want to focus on is we built an AI system that will challenge the developer. Most vulnerabilities introduced in software are due to assumptions, blind trust, and just not knowing how certain things work. It's easier if you're building a system, you go, I don't understand this SSL library, but I know if I read something on Bleeping Computer or something like that, how to implement this in my code, it works. So maybe it's done correctly and I'll just push it out that way. So the AI system we're building internally challenges that assumption when you do your code commit. Even if that code was written partly by AI, would say, we looked at the code, we verified there's some vulnerabilities in here. We've identified certain developers introduce certain classes of vulnerabilities now. So that might be something that would go to the management and say, so-and-so introduces a certain types of vulnerabilities consistently within their code. Maybe we might want to train them on how to do this function correctly. That's one of the key areas we really like to focus on. We would recommend customers doing. Another key area is you really want to focus on challenging the output that you get of AI code consistently. using AI to analyze that AI code actually does work very well now, especially in the past couple of weeks. Gemini, Claude, a couple others have gotten really good where you give it some code and you can say, I'm introducing a certain types of vulnerabilities. I think, can you validate this for me? And it can actually go through, validate that it is being done, how to actually fix it. You can now ask it, how do I fix this? You can actually now sometimes, if you're implementing authentication or authorization functionality, which is actually hard to do in coding, to say, am I doing this correctly? It can analyze and go, well, no, you're actually using cryptography in a wrong way. You have a static seed, your random number generator is an outdated method. Let's go with, we recommend these newer methods. And it doesn't hallucinate as much as it used to because it's more agentic based and it's pulling from different data sources and actually validating that information.
So I think one of a massive problem CISOs deal with in security teams, vulnerability fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like everything coming out, CVSS scores of 9 and over. Right. Everything's critical. EPSS scores, I think, are starting to become a little bit outdated. Probably need a little bit of an update, if you will. I think it's Patch Tuesdays come around. I think there's a lot of emergency patches happening, 0 days right. and things of that nature. So taking a classic problem like vulnerability management, including scopes related to unmanaged assets, third parties, and things like that, how can security teams incorporate AI into fast tracking
sure.
their vulnerability response, time to response, etc.?
I would say it has to be a process that you use AI in different key areas within that process. Okay. The first is going to be always prioritization. Any large entity will have on a Patch Tuesday sometimes millions of vulnerabilities they have to patch. If you take the NIST CVSS score, if you look at NIST website, it literally at the bottom says, do not use as a measure of risk, even though we've been doing it for 20 years. If you look at the EBSS score, it is a guess. It's an algorithm that has a mathematical dimensionality problem that tries to guess what could potentially happen. If you don't have enough information, you're going to miss a lot on that one. Even the newest version called SSPE uses branch prediction algorithm. It's still a prediction of what could potentially happen. We actually developed a product that does not prediction, but factual-based information of here is what we know for a fact threat actors are doing, and you can use that to prioritize. The next step I would take in prioritization is the back-end process. Who manages what? So, for example, if you have 600 Cisco servers that need to be patched, you're going to have to reach out to multiple different teams, create tickets, change requests, everything possible to actually manage that. There's ways to use AI that can actually help manage that process for you. Another key area we're really focusing on developing and looking at is attack path mapping. Say, for example, a patch comes out, it might have a CVS score of 6, but you got the intel telling you, we know threat actors are actually targeting this. And then you can look at it and go, okay, how do I use AI attack path mapping to validate what the steps would take to actually reach that vulnerable system in my network? And then you can also use AI as a risk matrix to say, okay, what do I have in place that can detect, mitigate, even deceive, and alert if there is an attack approaching that actual vulnerable asset? So
I think just to pick on that a little bit. So we're saying here that, I think for more effective vulnerability, especially in this day and age, we need to break out of the traditional vulnerability assessment model.
Yes.
We need to tie that to threat intel and actual active exploits that are being used. Because I think it was during COVID as well. Attackers were using exploits and vulnerabilities from 5 years prior as an example, right? It doesn't have to be the newest, latest, and greatest vulnerability that they're exploiting. It's just a matter of them being faster than our vulnerability patching methods, which I think a lot of organizations are still years behind, potentially.
Absolutely.
So AI being the glue that brings together the internal analysis with the external analysis, if that's a fair assessment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let me pick on that a little bit. If there's a vulnerability exploit that's happened in my environment, chances are that's probably not the end goal of the attacker. They probably want to do something bigger, right? Maybe go after crown jewels, maybe good old ransomware, etc. So what is it? I guess, are there any changes in how their reconnaissance within the network? getting to your crown jewels? Is there a change in what they're targeting within environments?
Yes.
And how is AI, I guess, accelerated or being able to evade existing security controls?
We see a lot of really unique research being done by threat actors in this area. One of them, we dubbed it the triple attack. Essentially, someone compromises your environment. We actually caught the threat actor and gained access to his AI tool he developed to do this. So he compromises your environment. He stays very quiet. He doesn't make a noise. He steals your emails. He steals your Slack messages. He puts that into his AI. And what it's doing is trying to identify individuals who would be susceptible to blackmail within your environment. Then he puts ransomware in the environment. And if you pay, he immediately egresses a ton of data. And then you have to pay again to keep him from leaking that data. Then he says, I'm done with the company. But what he does is his AI tool will tell him, this individual, maybe a comptroller in the CFO's office, got an email from the CFO telling them to do something, and it can identify that is actually a SOX violation to do that. So then he will turn this AI tool to go scour the internet and social media on those two individuals, identify who they are, what their interests are, reach out to them and go, by the way, we've got this communication between you two. You're going to pay me $50,000 or I'm going to contact the Security and Exchange Commission. And it wouldn't be sad for, your daughter Molly to not be able to play softball anymore because you don't have a job and you're in jail. So that's one of the things we've seen a threat actor use AI for in a very innovative way. Another one is what we call reverse attack path mapping, where they sit there and they do quietly map out your environment and identify where you lack in security controls across the board. They also will identify a lot of attacks are successful because one simple mistake is made, sometimes just for a few moments. Maybe somebody changes a firewall rule by mistake, which put the print server online for 2 minutes and it gets compromised. Someone, calls help desk while they're on vacation to reset their password. Someone mistakenly put the password in the ticket, but they check their email. They don't have time to reset the password to a new one for the next week. That's all it takes. A lot of times attackers get very lucky with that. So what the AI will do is then analyze, where does this consistent violation of policies, as I like to call it, happen? Is there certain individuals on the help desk who give everybody the same password reset, as an example?
So I know we only have a couple of minutes, so I'm going to pause here. I still got a couple of questions, but I want to pause here and see if there's any questions from the audience, whether it's general AI questions specific to policies, technical controls, things that you might be dealing with in your organization.
I think we got one here. Yeah.
Yes.
And let me give you the mic.
Sure.
Thank you. Hi, this is Rupesh from Buezi. You mentioned about AI used for developing the codes, and then other AI can validate that whether the code is accurate or not, or rather safe or not. So in this case, you are saying a good AI will moderate the not so good AI. So what are the parameters you consider for AI to be a good AI?
So what we look at is, instead of using large language models, we use small language models specifically trained on classes of vulnerabilities. So when you do that, say for example, common weakness enumeration, CWE type classifications. If you can say consistently, this is what a CWE violation would look like, no matter if you're using Java, Haskell, C, Python, it consistently looks like this type of a violation. Training small language models on that, it's going to be much smarter than any other type of a large language model on that specific area. So when you have a team of small language models or agents using small language models in that fashion, you don't always have to go to a different type of a larger LLM to actually do that. So in reverse, when we find vulnerabilities within our own code, one of the steps we do is send it to a different team of agents using the same training that we do to actually validate, one, can we reach that vulnerable component in that code? And if we can, what does an exploit look like? And then it'll help us actually write that exploit validate it, and then he even writes a detection rule for us too. So that's the method we use. It's much more effective than trying to throw everything into a large language model. Hope that helps. Okay.
Any other questions? Oh yeah, one in the back.
Yeah. When an attacker initiates an AI orchestrated attack on an organization, so what is the amount of time that we have to respond? Let's say we have our own playbooks and AI-enabled internal controls on our SIEM and our security tooling. So what is the golden period available? Is it like 3 minutes, 5 minutes? Can you walk us through that timeline?
That's an interesting question. I like to say to people, if you really want to know how bad it can be, take a unpatched Windows print server and put it on the internet, and I can promise you within 38 to about 48 seconds, it will be compromised. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's within seconds, but it's not AI. It's just a script out there on the internet, scanning the internet for that consistently. So that's not even AI to do that. Likewise, I've seen APT work where the threat actor literally sits on an OT environment, one machine for almost a year before they do anything. So it's ultimately comes down to getting a better understanding of not just the environment, but the context of everything in the environment and how it's supposed to work and function to support the business. So, in the APT that was sitting in that OT system for a year, if you're watching that, so the company didn't even know that asset even existed. And they didn't know it was on the internet, on their own network. So if they did know it, they could look at it very quickly and go, this is not doing what it should. Why is there SSH connections coming internally or coming to this? That should not happen. You have better coverage as a whole from all of your assets and understand what you have, you'll be able to catch that stuff much quicker. But likewise, when you have that Windows system that you put online with the print server, get it compromised. I ran a incident response team for a Fortune 100 company, and I used to tell them it takes seconds for a system to get compromised, it's unpatched. They did not believe me. They thought it would take hours. And that print server scenario did happen to us. They could not believe how fast it actually was.
Any other questions? Robbie?
How much time?
I think we're in the last last 10 minutes here. If there are no questions, maybe unless you had a question, I was going to say we're an OEM, we're a vendor. It's no secret. We're obviously leveraging AI. We have demands from our customers in Canada and across the globe of what their expectation is from an OEM and a vendor on what they're producing from an AI perspective. I was going to ask you, Michael, what are some of the top line expectations and top 3 expectations from an OEM as to how they want to see the product developed and introduced AI from a defensive perspective?
One of the key areas that we get a lot of feedback from is not just from the CISO, it's from other C-level executives. Like, you have a lot of immense data on my business. What other information can you tell me using AI? A CFO would love to know in his hospital, he's got 20 insulin pumps, but only 18 of them are actually used consistently. Why are the other 2 not being used? Is that a business process? Is it a backup system that's in there, or they're just not being used? Can I get rid of them? So we're getting a lot of really interesting feedback and questions from a lot of different areas, not just the cybersecurity aspect of things, but you've got a lot of data. How can we make more sense of everything that you're doing, that we're doing? That would make better financial decisions for us. We have actually been testing some of our new product lines that are coming out. We've had customers say, hey, we're working on a deal, a very large deal. Can you run your code scanning tool on this technology we're thinking about buying? We're actually thinking about buying the company, but we want to know what the impact of it is. So there's a lot of really interesting use cases that we're seeing develop out of that. When it comes to the AI and cybersecurity area, the biggest thing still comes back to the most basics. What do I have? What do I have my gaps in? When I take a look at the cybersecurity market space, we've got 6,000 plus vendors in the world that deal with cybersecurity. the vast majority of them all focus on the key same problems, but there's gaps within the market that we're using AI now to help fill in those gaps. And a great example is NVD. Last year, there was a lot of problems with it. Is it going to go away? Will the funding happen? There's other very strong fundamentals with NVD that's a big problem. Anything prior to 2022 does not get updated, even if there's no information about that. Problem is most OT systems are going to have a vulnerability that's running on there prior to 2022 that's going to have something might happen to. Maybe an exploit comes out against it. In addition, there's about 40-some thousand backlog of CVEs to get enriched. So we utilize AI to fix both those problems. So now we enrich them within 48 hours of any CVE coming out. We actually add additional context to it. One of the biggest problems is CPE information. And what that basically is a product description as well as version number. Apple's really horrible at this. Well, they'll come out and say, there's a patch for OS X 10.2 to, and they'll say like a version name of, Leopard or something like that. And you're just like, okay, what does that mean? Which ones are actually in scope? So we use AI to now enrich that CPE information and say, actually, these are what's actually in scope to that vulnerability. So those are areas we look at where we talk to individual, very forward-thinking CISOs and going, here's my gap in this area. I don't, my code scanning tools are 20 years old. They're all using templates. AI right now, Gemini is doing about 63% accuracy. What can you guys do? How can you actually validate what you're doing? So that's an area we're really strongly focused on.
That's awesome. We got a question here. Mr. Renee Gubin.
Sorry, I jumped in late. So if you've already answered this, then I'll go away. Do you see the risk differently, AI risk differently within a manufacturing OT environment than maybe an IT environment that doesn't really have OT hanging around? I mean, forget the cameras. Everybody has that, but just in general, like manufacturing being an example. Is there something that stands out that maybe we're not thinking about because we're thinking just generalities?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kick things off and then, of course, jump in. I think when it comes to something like an OT environment where, an air gap theoretically exists, I think AI is just extremely fast at understanding and detecting much more critical network controls that act as gaps and a foothold into a much more sensitive and critical environment than a standard IT environment might be. So the ability for, hey, this is a critical system, especially if that system hasn't necessarily been identified, built, and linked together, it's much faster and easier to identify what that weak chain is. And given that OT systems have very complex, if any at all, patching capabilities, that leaves these environments much more vulnerable, I think, than standard IT environments where a laptop and server that traditionally we've been securing for 20 plus years now is much easier. As a cybersecurity individual, all of a sudden we have folks that are tasked with understanding assets that they're not familiar with. And on the flip side, we have OT plant managers that are responsible for cybersecurity that they're not familiar with. So we also have this convergence of two different roles and having two worlds try and understand each other in a very quick period of time that attackers are taking advantage of, even the knowledge gaps that exist in between.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing threat actors really pivot heavy into the OT technology side of things because it's easier for them to stay there and not get caught. So once they jump into the IT systems, they get caught, they get kicked out. Great, I still have my foothold still in the OT systems that haven't been patched in 20 years. So they're really getting good at identifying where those air gaps exist and don't exist. Identifying these jump servers, technically they should be patched, but they're not. They're treated as OT systems, but they're not getting patched, and threat actors are really good at finding those now. They're really good at finding dual-homed network cards that are sitting on both the OT and the production network.
And I think to that point, real quick, I think, when these OT environments are only vendor managed or they can only be updated or upgraded by vendors, you're now introducing, and you must introduce to a certain extent, third-party systems into your most critical environments that you either don't control, you don't have necessarily the security posture of the devices that are being connected, so you're reliant on a third party actually securing their systems in a much more critical environment. I think that criticality then feeds into whether it's the willingness to pay a ransom or the willingness to give into attacker demands as well. So that contextual criticality further feeds into an attack as well.
Awesome. We are just at the top of the 45th minute here at 43. Any last questions or comments from anyone? Hopefully this was productive. Thank you all for coming to the talk. I think to summarize, we've discussed and articulated the scope and speed of weaponization of threat actors on the attacking side, whether it's state actors like Russia and China or ransomware attacks coming in across all different industries, healthcare, manufacturing, and how to best leverage AI as an organization and as an enterprise, whether it's on the developer side, whether it's on the IT side, OT side, CISOs, and across business units. So hopefully there was some takeaways here. Thank you all so much for coming. Mo Watkis and Michael Freeman from Armis. Thanks, guys.